Okay, it's 6:30, we're going to start our meeting. Good evening, welcome to the July 23rd Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. To my left is Mr. Carter Falk, who is the Deputy Planning Manager for the City of Nashua. Across the way we have Mr. Stephen Lionel, who serves as our Vice President, Mr. Jay Mincara, Mr. Robert Shaw, Mrs. Staffia Boris, Ms. Mary Ellen McKay, who serves as our Secretary, and I'm J.P. Boucher. I'm your chair tonight. This meeting is recorded by written transcript, audio tape, and video. We ask that you please direct all the testimony into the microphone at the podium, and only one person speak at a time. If you don't have tonight's agenda, I believe it's on the back table in the back of the auditorium. Tonight we'll be hearing requests for deviations from the City of Nashua Zoning Code in the form of applications for special exceptions and variances. I'll explain both of those. A special exception is a request that seeks permission to do something that the zoning ordinance permits only under special circumstances. The 5 criteria required for this board to grant a request for a special exception are: 1, that the requested use must be listed in the table of use regulations as a special exception; 2, the requested use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety; 3, the requested use will not overload any public water, drainage, sewer system, or any other municipal system, such as that other areas of the city will be subjected to hazards affecting health, safety, or general welfare; 4, any special regulations for the use set forth in other sections of the zoning ordinance are fulfilled; and 5, the requested use will not impair the integrity or character of the district of adjoining zones, nor be detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of the residents of Nashua. A variance is a request that seeks permission to do something that the ordinance does not permit. The 5 criteria that need to be established to approve a variance are: 1, the variance will not be contrary to public interest; 2, the spirit of the ordinance is observed; 3, substantial justice is done; 4, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished; and 5, their literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Per the City of Nashua bylaws, a minimum of 3 or more affirmative votes are required to approve any application. In addition, this board will hear any and all scheduled cases as long as a quorum of 3 voting board members are present at this meeting, and we have a quorum tonight. Any citizen has the right to contest the decision that this board makes. Should we make a decision that you believe is an error, you have a right to request a rehearing. A written rehearing request must be received from Mr. Falk and the City of Nashua Planning Department within 30 days from the day after a decision was made. Should this board not grant a rehearing request, you can file an appeal directly to the New Hampshire Superior Court, and you can contact Mr. Falk for more information on that. Per our approved Zoning Board of Adjustment bylaws, the review and decision of each application occurs in 2 parts. The first part is what we call the public hearing. This is where the applicant and the citizens address this board and speak to the merits of the case. The order of testimony is as follows. 1, the applicant will have 15 minutes to present their case. Then those in favor will have a limit of 5 minutes each to speak. Then those in opposition or with questions will also have a limit of 5 minutes each to speak. Then the applicant has 5 minutes to speak in rebuttal. And then finally, a representative, and only one person, of those in opposition or with questions will have 5 minutes to speak in rebuttal. You'll notice that there's a time clock up here, and we'll let you know when you come up. If you're the applicant, you'll have 15 minutes. If you're coming to speak for or against, you have 5 minutes. The clock will count down. It'll be green. Once you get to 1 minute time limit, it'll turn amber and then turn red. And at that point, we'll have to stop the testimony. So just be aware that we'll be using the time clock tonight. Please direct all testimony to this board and not to anyone in the audience. If you have questions about the application, they have to be directed to the board, and we'll get those answered for you. The second part of tonight's meeting is what we call the public meeting. This is where the board debates the merits of this case amongst ourselves. Please note that during this meeting, there is no testimony allowed from the audience. We ask that you silence your cell phones. If you need to have a conversation, we ask that you step out in the hallway. Acoustics are excellent in this room. We can hear everything that is being said in the audience. Mr. Falk, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, there are not.
Is there any questions in the audience before we get started? Okay, seeing none, I will call the first case. The first case is for Teresa Manor of 15 Adams Street. Description is Teresa Manor, owner of 15 Adams Street, sheet 64, lot 11, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-31 to encroach 3 feet into the 6-foot required side yard setback to erect a 6x10 garden shed. It's in the RA zone. Welcome. If you give us your name and address, please, for the record.
Yes, my name is Teresa Manor, 15 Adams Street in Nashua.
We have your application. You just tell us, if you don't want to go through step by step, that's fine. Just tell us what you want to do, what's going on.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not very well prepared. My printer wasn't working. I had wanted to print out
Okay,
all
just
the...
tell us what we're doing.
But I currently have a lean-to shed against my house. It's falling apart, and it's made of Rubbermaid. It needs to be removed because I'm going to have some outdoor work done on my siding. And I would like to put in a permanent shed, not against the house, but within my yard. And I have a very small side yard. In keeping with the 6-foot variance, it would place the shed right in front of my dining room window, and I would lose quite a bit of the use of my yard as a result of that. So what I'm asking is if I can have the shed instead placed 3 feet away from my neighbor. Both my neighbors I've discussed this with, they're both absolutely fine with it. And I have a 6-foot fence, so it doesn't impact them visually or in any way, and it's just a tool shed, nothing else. And it's actually not going to be 6x10, it's 6x8. I'm scaling it down a little bit.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Shaw?
Do you know the approximate height of the shed?
As I recall, it's about 6.5 or 7 feet. It's from Reed's Ferry. I'm really not positive.
Okay, but you don't expect it to be much taller than the fence itself. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No, and on the other side, I provided some photos. My abutter on the other side has a shed on the other side. So they would be in alignment for the most part.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak with questions or opposition to the application? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Shaw.
Maybe before we start,
yes.
just the whole question. Yeah.
Miss Boris will go first, and then Mr. McCarron will back vote, unless one of you have to recuse yourself. So for the audience, we have an extra member tonight. There's only 5 votes allowed, and we have 2 members, an extra member here. We have two alternates. They're acting alternates, but they've been here regularly, so when we have the situation, we'll switch off. So Miss Boris will vote on this case. Mr. Minkera will participate, just won't vote, and that'll be the same case with all our proceedings. The non-voting member has the right to participate all right up to the voting. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I'll start off. I took a ride by the property. A couple of things. I think the applicant stated pretty quite correctly. I kind of noticed by looking aside that there was windows there up. I didn't know it was a dining room, but it's kind of the dining room. The lot, the way this lot's situated, it's long and wide. And so, and again, a small lot. And again, I noticed what was, again, on the other side of the neighbor. I'm glad to hear that there was no concerns. Obviously, no one spoke in opposition to the application. I think it's reasonable, again, and where she's situated in the yard, I mean, makes perfect sense to me. So I think it's, for me, it's kind of a cut and dry thing for me as far as the reasoning why we would put it there and not anywhere else, because it would end up kind of like in the middle of the yard, or, you know, kind of blocking the views from the house. So I'm in support of the application. Sure.
Yeah, I am too, and I think having the fence also, to me, is very helpful in this regard. But I pretty much concur with what you just said.
Mr. Lionel?
I'm also in support.
Okay.
I'm also in support, and I just add that there are also a number of other sheds in the neighborhood that don't meet a 6-foot setback. It's pretty common in the area.
Thank you. Good.
I concur.
All right. Ms. Morris?
I also concur with my colleagues. I'm in support.
All right. I'll make a motion unless somebody wants to make it. All right. I'd like to make a motion for Teresia Manor, 15 Adams Street. Description is Teresia Manor, owner, 15 Adams Street, sheet 64, lot 11, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-31 to encroach 3 feet into the 6-foot required side yard setback to erect a 6x10 garden shed. It's in the RE zone. Right. I'll make a motion, so the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. Again, it's a small lot, wide and narrow, where the house is situated, and we spoke about where the shed was. If it would be within the setback, it would be in front of the dining room window, kind of in the middle. And we also noted that there's a shed across the fence from this location of this shed, and that in this neighborhood, because it's smaller lots, there are, you know, again, it's typical to see sheds within the setback. And I will note that the applicant did say that they were going to put a 6x8 shed, but again, the application was for a 6x10, so we're just going to approve that, and if they go smaller, that's okay. Larger would not be okay. And we find that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue than the variance. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find that it's not contrary to public interest, and we find that substantial justice will be served. So with that, I make a motion to approve the area variance for Teresia Manor. Seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is 5-0. Congratulations, ma'am, your application is approved. Again, just be aware, there's a 30-day window of appeal, highly unlikely, but just be aware. Thank you very much. With that, I'll close case number 1 and call case number 2. Open case number 2. Case number 2 is Ashok and Neela Shatilia, applicants Elite Builders of 3 Appaloosa Place. They're requesting a variant. It's sheet B, lot 2127, requesting variance from Land Use Code, section 190-16, table 16-3, to encroach up to 4 feet into the 10-foot required right yard setback to construct an attached home addition and a 23 by 23 2-car garage. It's an R9 zoning district. And just to be clear, Mr. Minkara will be voting on this case for the case number 2. Welcome. You have your name and address, please?
Yep, my name's Graham Wiley. I'm the contractor representing the homeowner at 3 Appaloosa Place.
So feel free to lift the microphone up and pull it
I
out
will.
whenever you like, just so we can get you. Thank
All
you.
right. So we're proposing to build a 2-car garage attached to the east side of the property, along with a 20 by 20 rear addition. The issue we're running into with the setback is with the garage itself, not the rear addition. The lot line goes at kind of an extreme angle, which you guys can see from the plot plan. We approximately have the 10-foot required setback on the corner of the garage, but at the back corner of the garage, we have, we're going to be 4 feet short of the required 10-foot setback. We explored moving the garage forward to, avoid the angle of the lot line, but on the corner of the house, there is a gas meter, which would require, if we pulled the garage forward, relocating of the gas meter to the other side of the house, obviously digging up the street and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind at the moment.
the garage, no living space on top?
No, unfinished.
Just a garage?
Correct.
So, so just a one-story garage?
Correct, yep. Two car.
You may have some storage up there, but nothing where there's will be any living
No,
space?
it won't be a walk-up.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions for the applicant? You want to just take a minute, take a look at Mr. Shaw?
I guess one thing, and a lot of times it seems like we see 24 feet as the width for a structure like this. Was that
Yep.
something you had already initially explored and backed off
Correct.
some to
We
try to?
actually scale it back to 23 feet just
Okay.
to try to get as much room, to the lot line as possible. Obviously, if we shrunk the garage anymore, it wouldn't really be a two-car garage anymore. So we explored a few options to try to avoid this and, keep it as tight to the property as we could.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Anybody else in the audience that'd like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none. Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? Come on up, sir, and give us your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Sicard, 13 Bullock Street in Nashua. Although I certainly can appreciate the homeowner wanting to make some improvements here, I do feel that there's an encroachment here on some common grounds. I think if the homeowners were going to continue to live as they have for the last 2 years that I've been there, then I would be for this. I think the real issue is that there's going to be a lifestyle change, as they mentioned in the outline. It's a big building. It's going to be closer to the two homes with the mentioned impact of extended family, noise, etc. I think that there is a solution to this. I think running a fence at, I'm not sure what the max height is, but let's say we go from 6 feet to 8 feet from the current fence at 13 Bullock alongside 11 Bullock Street, where fill would be put in, and we would run that all the way down. And I think that we would resume what privacy is being taken away. That's all. Thank you.
Any questions? So, the privacy is from the garage being there, or is there something else that?
Yeah, I think that it's, the houses are close enough together, and when you see how that's really going to impact from a view from my yard. Again, like I said, I can appreciate. I think that it's good for the value of the properties that are around. I just think that there's opportunity to make this a little bit better.
Okay. Any other questions for the gentleman? Mr. Shaw?
I guess I just want to make sure, are you saying that you would prefer if there was a fence? And so I can tell you, 6 foot is all that's allowed without variance. 8 foot requires a variance, so that's a whole nother application. So as far as if the applicant was open to things, the only thing they could do without pursuing, again, variance relief would be the 6 foot fence. But so is it still your testimony that at least if there were 6 foot fence running alongside the property there, that would be somewhat remediating from your view?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that'd like to speak with questions, concerns, or opposition? Come on up, sir. Just name and address again, please.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Goodwin. I'm at 15 Bullock Street.
What's the address again?
15 Bullock.
15 Bullock Street.
So I'm on the other property line where the garage is going to be against.
Would you speak up, please, or take the microphone out?
Okay.
Having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Our concern is just with soil runoff, soil erosion, and that between our two properties, there's a valley, and I have photos if you want to see.
Sure you can hand them to Mr. Lionel if you'd like.
hear him.
Yeah, whatever.
I think actually, it almost seems like the volume in the room isn't, or something's not good with that mic tonight.
Yeah, maybe you can help. See if you can help.
Do you know if we can adjust the mic at the podium at all? No, it seems like it's not coming through very well. Okay. Maybe it's the speakers in the auditorium then.
Okay, sorry. So with the current state, we're getting soil erosion from their property when it rains, like it has in the past couple days, coming down into our gardens. And with the addition of the garage and widening of the driveway, which is going to accompany the garage, it's only going to be a little bit worse. So what we've asked the builder, Graham here, to do is to use some of the fill from the excavation for building the garage and the addition and use that to grade the property between our two properties. So there won't be as much of a depression. And he has agreed to do that and put topsoil down and seed it. If that happens, we are happy with the variance going through. But I think without that, we'd have concerns.
Are there any questions for the show? Mr. Lionel?
You mentioned widening of the driveway. That isn't part of the application, but there is a general rule that any construction cannot add to runoff onto other people's property. So I suppose we could stipulate that the contractor add appropriate drainage or other things to make sure that there is no additional runoff onto your property. Would that be acceptable?
That would be acceptable, yes. And I think the proposed remediation of filling some of that gap with the fill removed from the building would accomplish that as well.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else like to speak with questions, concerns, or opposition to the application? Okay, seeing none. The applicant has 5 minutes to come back to speak in rebuttal. So you come on up and just your name and address again for the record.
Graham Wiley, I'm the contractor for 3 Appaloosa. So I had a chance to speak to both abutters prior to the meeting this evening, and agreed that we needed to grade out that area. As you saw from the pictures, there's quite a substantial gully between the properties, and I think we would have the material there, and we could certainly grade that out, seed it, and that would appease those abutters. No problem doing that for sure. It's pretty easy to do. I had spoke to the homeowner just now about putting in a 6-foot wooden stockade fence after construction is complete, and he agreed that's well within reason and he'd be willing to do that.
Okay. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any questions? Oh,
Yep.
Ross. Thank you.
All right.
Two gentlemen that spoke, you have the right to come back and speak. You have 5 minutes to speak in rebuttal. Only one person, though. So if either one of you wants to come up, it's your choice, or you both can rest. And just your name and address again for the record.
Nathan Sicard, 13 Bullock Street in Nashua. Just a clarification on the fence as far as start and end from property line. I just some sort of identification on where that's going to be going.
So what's, I'm a little,
Well, they agreed to put up the fence. I'm just wondering, start and finish, where is that going to go? Yeah, we have two properties that are the concern, so I just,
well, I think at this point, I think, I'm not sure what, what that was. I'm assuming that he was talking about your property. I don't know, if it's full, if it's the whole length, and we'd have to make a procedure to find out if we want to find out. But
We could certainly stipulate a fence along that entire property line if we wanted to.
and that's what I was really proposing.
Right,
Because
right.
I think it makes aesthetic sense, especially where that fill is going. And really and I think I misspoke earlier, I think I said 11 Bullock, it's 15 Bullock. But if that fence goes from 13 Bullock all the way down 15, I think that would make the most sense and appease all parties.
We typically not go all the way to the street, though.
No, I think, we'll let the contractor, chime in how he,
The contractor doesn't unfortunately have another chance to do that unless we reopen the session. But, yeah, okay, we can deal with that, I think.
thank you.
No other questions? Right now, before I move on to close, I don't understand what they're actually committing to. So I think that I'm not going to have a discussion. I'm just going to, my proposal will be to just recall the applicant just to answer where the fence would start and where it would end. And that's all I want to know. We can make our own decisions after that, okay? So I need to make a motion for that.
I'll move to reopen to ask the question regarding the homeowner's plan for placement of the fence.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Minkara. All in favor? Okay. Sir, you want to come on up? I don't know if you were following. We're just having you up just to answer one question.
Yep.
We just need to know where the fence would start and where it would end, what you're willing to do.
So without pointing to it, it would be at the back right corner of the lot line, as you can see where the two corners meet, which I
So the
believe
back-
is where the butter's existing fence would be ending and would be starting the new one.
So would you mind just,
Would you like me to
Use
come
the
up?
document camera.
you could just put under the document camera? It's going to show there and just point out.
But you'll need to grab the mic if you're going to say anything
Yeah.
about it.
Sorry, just grab the mic.
That's a handheld, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I believe we would be starting it right here, which I believe is what the abutter is worried about,
Yeah, and
and continuing it as far as we could towards the street,
okay,
which would appease both of those. The homeowner indicated that's something he wanted to do anyways, so
okay. All right, so approximately 150 feet.
approximately.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all we need to know.
Yep.
Are we all set? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And again, Mr. Minkara will be voting on this case. Excuse me, sir. Sir? I'm sorry, we could hear everything, and I apologize. Okay, thank you. Mr. Lionel.
I'm in favor of the application with the stipulation of the fence as described by the contractor and the fill as described by the contractor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Minkara?
I would agree. I would just note that, having a garage, two-car garage is, increasingly the norm. It's certainly common in this area. I think the applicants have demonstrated that they have made an effort to try to fit it in within the setback, but were unable to because of the location of the gas line. They've brought it to 23 feet, which I think was an effort to make it as narrow as possible for a two-car garage. And I think those factors, and also given, and we've seen this before, The way the lot is configured at an angle on a cul-de-sac with the house more or less perpendicular leaves really no other area to put a garage on the site. I would also support the stipulations of including the fence along the property line mentioned, as well as the addition of the fill, the grading, and the seating that was requested.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Minkara just said everything I wanted to, so I completely concur.
I will also support support that.
I too agree. Mr. Minkara said it succinctly and well.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Mr. Shaw, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion on behalf of Ashok and Nala Chitalia, the owners. The applicant is Elite Builders. The address is 3 Appaloosa Place, with the application to be requesting a variance from Land Use Code, Section 190-16, Table 16-3, to encroach up to 4 feet into the 10-foot required right side yard setback to construct an attached home addition and 23-foot by 23-foot two-car garage, and this is in the R9 zone. The variance is needed for the applicant's proposed use of the property. Again, the primary issue here is trying to accommodate a two-car garage and the location of the house on the lot, the odd shape of the lot, the lack of the lot lines versus the home being perpendicular to them, and even the placement of gas lines near the front of the house where any attempt to bring the garage forward would be impeded by. The applicant had already reduced the width of the garage, pretty much leaving some limited encroachment. And again, this encroachment of the 4 feet only is at the very rear corner of the proposed structure. It will be less as you come forward along the property line. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to support the applicant's use of the property this way. There's been no testimony one way or the other about any negative effects on property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. Also note that the applicant is in support and willing to adhere to a couple stipulations that are requested by abutters, and that is to build a 6-foot stockade fence essentially along the entire right side yard property line, at least to the extent of how far that can be brought to the street itself, but pretty much from the rear of the property all the way forward as far as allowed, as well as also using fill to grade out some of the gully area, as again discussed and agreed to with the abutters. So those are the two stipulations that we apply to this variance request, and with that I move to approve this request.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lionel. Any discussion? All in favor? That's 5-0. Congratulations, the application's approved. All right, thank you. With that, I'll close case number 2. Before I get started, case number 3. Excuse me, sir, in the back. Sir, we can hear you talking. So, again, I ask if you could just step out if you need to talk. We can hear everything you're saying. All right, thank you. I appreciate your help. Thank you. Okay, with that, I will close case number 2 and open case number 3. Case number 3 is owner Janet Georges, applicants Gottsman and Hollis, professional attorneys, 67 Groton Road, sheets D, lots 134 and 323, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17, Section B, to allow 4 principal structures on 1 lot, 1 permitted. It's in the R40 district.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman and Hollis in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I'm here this evening representing the owners of the property, which essentially are the Georges family. This is a rather specific property. You're going to hear me discuss the uniqueness of it, but I've passed out sets of photographs which identify the property, and I think it's, if you've ever driven out on Groton Road, you recognize it. The one set of pictures shows face-on of the property, which includes a distinguished home with a red barn, and I've also passed out an aerial photograph of it and some other photographs for the audience. I've put the aerial up, which shows the layout of the property, and I'm now going to just place the picture of the property as you drive by it, so you might recognize it. This property is identified as being 61-67 Groton Road, and as I say, I've given you pictures of the site so you can see what it looks like. It may put a picture in your mind of what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to accomplish. These pictures were taken by my client across the street, and then the other pictures, the other set, are included in a package of Mr. Chet Rogers, who is an appraiser, and I simply photocopied the set out of his appraisal report. The property consists of two properties currently, and if you go to the package with the aerial photograph, the second picture depicts the second picture in that set depicts the current boundary layout. And you can see there is a single house on lot D-323, and then there's to the rear a garage barn structure, and immediately over the property line there is a pool and a cabana house, which actually goes with the home on D-323. There's also the main house and main red barn of the picture that I previously showed, and that is on lot D-134. So you can see there's quite a large lot and then a smaller lot. Altogether, they're in excess of 7.6 acres. My client would like to make use of, this is a family farm, obviously, family homestead. His grandmother recently passed away. His father passed away recently. He's trying to figure out what's a good layout and what's a good program to maximize this property without removing what we consider a landmark in the area. My client has sufficient acreage to put 4 more units on the open space area of the larger lot. And my client met with his engineer, and they met with city planning staff. And the planning staff recommended to them that they take a look at a layout which would preserve as much open space, preserve as much of the view as you drive by, so a viewscape, and make use of a private road. This property is a bit unusual in that it has large frontage, but believe it or not, the current driveway has a problem with regard to sight distance visibility because the height of the road towards the left of the property as you look at it, you start dipping down the hill, and when you get to the entrance of Groton Road, the Groton Woods condominiums, it's a lower level. So there's only one place along that frontage to put a road to gain access, and that is what's proposed on the plan which we submitted with the application. And that's a private road in that area. You can't, believe it or not, put a public way where the existing driveway is because of sight distance visibility due to that curve in the road and the drop in the topography. So there's one location to put it, and that's it. So it's a little bit of an unusual piece, not only with regard to the current architecture and design and wall that sits there, but also with regard to what you can do to develop this piece and make use of all this acreage, 7.6 acres out there in Groton Road in South Nashua. The planning staff came up with recommendation which resulted in the plan which has been presented, and it's up on the screen here. The plan that's presented is there would be a private road.
Please take the microphone.
Sorry. Into 4 detached condominium units. The lot itself would wrap around the existing house and that lot is 160,000 square feet plus, and your requirement is 40,000 square feet per unit. So if you subdivided, you would get 4 houses on this if you did the layout differently and put a public road in. This is a private road. We're going to put 4 houses there. This would be common area to the condominium, but it would not be part of or used necessarily by the condominium because it's really the front yard. They would have a landscape easement reserved to this house. These 2 houses would continue to share the driveway, so there'd be a driveway access coming over the condominium land. So for all intents and purposes, this is going to be the 4 units on 1 lot in this area. We're able to preserve the house with the barn, its existing driveway, the house in the back, and we're able to move a lot line, if we do it this way, to include the pool. Now, I realize that lot lines are going to be determined by the planning board, and we're showing what we think is the correct answer, and we're willing to live by this plan. If the planning board changes the plan, we'd have to come back to you if it was a substantially different application. But that's the layout of what's proposed, and as I say, the genesis of this layout was actually from the planning staff working with my client because they wanted to preserve this driveway. They wanted to be able to put a road in, and they suggested a private way, and this is the right place for it. Can't really locate it down here. This is the curve in the road and the drop. While it's opposite Hadley, it doesn't work. This is really the only spot for it. And by virtue of this being common area, it essentially locks out this property from developing the front end here. And I think that made the planning staff happy in their proposed look at this property. So in order to do that, you're only allowed 1 structure on each lot in this zone. And we're not proposing to subdivide this large lot into 4 lots. We're proposing to put 4 structures by virtue of condominium unit ownership on this lot, which is big enough for essentially 4 units. As a result, we need a variance to allow those 4 structures. I'm going to cover the 5 points of the variance. I have here this evening a representative from Keach Nordstrom Associates who did the plan, and be happy to answer any questions that you might have with regard to the plan. I'll put this up. Crosshatched area on the plan represents the proposed single lot for the 4 structures. The first point is it will not be contrary to the public interest. I would argue that allowing 4 structures on a single lot in this particular instance is in fact in the public interest in that it preserves that valuable viewscape of those pictures that I've presented. The 4 detached units are going to be more proximate to Groton Woods, which is actually a cluster development. You can see on the back of the site plan that's presented some of the structures. You can see on the aerial the existence of the Groton Woods structures and how they cluster. They're open space, yet clustered units together. This is similar to the character of that Groton Woods. They're far enough back from the road. The proposed plan is there'll be no closer than 100 feet to the road, and there's going to be screening. They're able to preserve most of that large stone wall. They're going to have a fence, and they'll preserve the trees along the front. The project will still end up with 40,000 square feet per unit for the area. So in terms of density, it's going to be similar to other lots and the Groton Woods condominium development in terms of square footage. It's a private way. That's in the public interest, and it's one less public road for the town, the city to maintain and the public to be responsible for. It's less pavement because private ways can be narrower than public ways. It won't alter the character of the neighborhood in that we're proposing separate dwelling units, and that is exactly what you find out in that area of South Nashua. There's adequate area for septic system for each dwelling unit, and each unit would have their own septic. Municipal water comes to Hadley Woods and also Groton Woods, and so it would just be extended across the street from Hadley Drive into this project. There's no issue with wells and proximity to septic, which is oftentimes what you have in a 40,000 square foot lot area. There's no threat to health, safety, or welfare due to the size of the area allowed for the 4 units. And as I say, there's appropriate site distance for this private way to be located right where it is. Number 2, observe the spirit of the ordinance. The general spirit of an ordinance requiring 40,000 square feet is that the lots have sufficient area for sewer and water. As I mentioned, in this instance, there's municipal water, so we're just dealing with septic. There's adequate space on this lot because there is a total of 40,000 per unit going in. It's not contrary to the spirit of the ordinance in that the purpose of the ordinance is to give space and to preserve views between homes as well as for the protection of the septic and well requirements. This will preserve all the views. These homes will be set back. They'll be clustered in a nice development area, much like Groton Woods is. And as I mentioned before in the first point, there'll be no threat to the health, safety, or welfare of the public. Number 3, substantial justice will be done. This will accomplish the goal of the owner to keep the 2 properties essentially as is, maintain the viewscape, keep the fair and reasonable use of the excess land in keeping with what the zoning and current development in that area might be. There'll be no harm to the public if you grant the variance, in that 4 units will be located on a private way, tucked away from the front with appropriate screening and adequate buffer to the rear. There'll be no adverse impact on the value of surrounding neighborhood properties. This property, as I said, will be at least 100 feet set back from the road. You have the large fence to screen it. You're also going to have the existing trees that will be maintained in the front to screen it. It'll be a private way, so it's not public traffic, only 4 units coming and going. And in addition to that, I requested an appraiser, an independent appraiser, J. Chet Rogers, to take a look at the property, look at the values of the surrounding properties, and come up with a conclusion whether this proposed 4-unit development would in fact impact the values of surrounding properties. I've submitted that letter to the board this evening, and rather than read the entire thing, the entire letter, it is addressed to me. It's dated July 22, and he describes the property just as I've described it. The properties on the opposite side of the road are heavily screened by trees and lower vegetation, and he has a picture of that in his package. At lot 134-1, the proposed site is also well screened. Hadley Drive is positioned such that left turns in both sides of Groton Road will not conflict with a private way. Surrounding properties consist of single-family homes on large lots on Hadley Drive and the rear abutting Groton Woods cluster housing development, which is similar in nature to the proposed project. There are no commercial uses in the immediate neighborhood. None of the abutters will be impacted by granting the variance to the subject. I opine that the proposed variance will not materially alter the character of the neighborhood and will not adversely impact values of nearby properties. And finally, I get to number 5, which is the hardship argument. I think I've made a case that this is a rather unique property just by virtue of what's existing out there. It's a large lot. It has a shared driveway, a large stone wall, which is beautiful. We'd all hate to see chopped down, a large barn. We're trying to come up with a creative way to use the excess property without overdeveloping it. But the most unique feature of the property is that it really only has this one place for a public way or a private way. And the smaller way we can do it, the better off we are. This uniqueness therefore feeds into the second criteria, which is because of the uniqueness, is there any fair and substantial relationship to enforcing the ordinance? The purpose of the ordinance is to keep one structure on one lot on 40,000 square feet. In this instance, my argument is there is no fair and substantial relationship to the purpose of keeping one on one. You're accomplishing the same goals of one house on 140,000 square foot when you put 4 on 160,000 square foot. There's adequate open space, and by using the private way, we're really doing much more in the public interest than if we had a public way. Finally, the proposed use must be reasonable. And I would argue that for this setting, for this unique and unusual viewscape and limited ability to be flexible in this lot, we think this is the most reasonable way to use this property. And we think the variance, if you granted it, would allow a reasonable use. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Lino?
Are you aware of any regulations regarding disturbing the stone wall? I know in some towns there are. I don't know about Nashua.
There is a statute about disturbing a stone wall on a scenic road, but I don't believe that that's applicable here. If it is, we would obviously have to get approvals to cut that portion of the stone wall at the very end. The proposal is going to be right at the very end. I believe there's a picture in there, and you can see it on the plan. The very end of the stone wall is where the cut would take place.
No. Okay, thank you.
Any other question, Mr. Minkara?
Could you just speak again about the variance that's proposed in front of the house all the way to the right? I think you'd mentioned something about a landscape variance?
No variance.
Not variance, a landscape easement?
It's likely that what we would like to do is propose a landscape easement to the property located on Lot 323, which would, this is the front yard essentially. And if he looks out, and this is the common area to the condominium, and they don't choose to go over there and maintain it, it's going to affect the appearance, the whole appearance. So what we are going to propose is a landscape easement to the benefit of Lot 323. So it's maintained as a complete front.
Mr. Shaw?
So the other thing I think that happens, though, if you went with the public way, is you would lose some of the square footage, and you would at most be able to put 3 structures, I would assume, since you're just sitting at that, essentially.
We looked at a lot of different options, and we believe that we can cut the property up to get a public way in there to get 4 units. However, it will not look like that. And one of the options is that the barn gets affected. The other option is that that portion of the house ends up, there's going to be easements, cross easements on someone else's property. There is sufficient land in 7 acres to put the roadway, gain access to a road up through here, put some units, and end up with a unit down in the front. The goal is not to have another unit in the front.
And I think your other argument was that a public way would be much more significant kind of encroachment into the Groton Road and the appearance of having a much larger entrance there, and change kind of the feel of
Changes the
things
whole
as well.
nature of it. A private way is a narrower way, and it looks like a driveway because it is really a shared driveway in this instance.
And I assume also that even like some of the details of like the way some of the parking and that private way will ultimately maybe come down to the discussion with the planning board as well, right? So
That's correct. They have to determine whether whether there's adequate enough space for cars to park. That's correct.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none. Anybody like to speak with questions, concerns, or opposition to the application? Sir, come on up. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Bill Griswold, and I'm at 21 Hadley Drive, right across from the proposed development. What are the buildings going to look like that are going to be put up there? That's my only question.
Okay, hold on, sir. Any questions for the applicant, for this gentleman? No? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anybody else would like, does anybody else have any questions, concerns, or oppositions to the application? Okay, seeing none. Attorney Hollis, you have 5 minutes to come back and speak to.
First, I'll point out where Mr. Griswold is on the plan, so everybody can see it. Located right there at the corner of Hadley,
Microphone,
on the westerly side.
microphone.
It's just the microphone. I'm sorry.
On the westerly side of Hadley, right on this lot. So he's the corner lot over here, looking this direction. And I'd like to introduce the project engineer who can answer the question on the structures.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Chisholm. I'm a PE and project manager with Keach Nordstrom Associates. We don't actually have a footprint or building design or anything like that at this point in time, but what we did do is provide and will provide for planning purposes a 60 by 40 footprint for them to work within. We believe that that's an adequate number to base things off of, like stormwater management, erosion, things like that. So, you know, probably it's going to be whatever the market bears, 3-4 bedroom house, something like that, maybe even 5 bedroom if it's desirable and we can get the septic systems to fit. But that's kind of a question for a later date, so we don't have anything very specific at this point in time. But I can tell you that whatever it is, it's going to fit in with the character of the neighborhood. It's not going to be, you know, something that's completely, you know, not there or outside the realm of what's there now.
And just for clarification, I think Attorney Hollis did say that there'll be some type of landscaping that will blind some of that.
Yes, exactly right. So there are landscape requirements for all site plans, which this is essentially going to be once we go before the planning board. There is landscaping shown down in here, roughly in line with the zoning or the land use code, I should say. And that'll get tweaked as, you know, once we get a landscape architect on board and get a final design from them during that process.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none? Okay. No questions? Okay, thank you very much. Sir, you have the opportunity to come back and speak if you like. If not, you don't have to. Yeah. Okay. And before I close the public hearing, I'll suggest to you that you know, if this project moves on, go to the planning board meetings for this project. Right, that's where they discuss more of the details. Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And this is case number 3, so this, Boris will be voting on this case. Mr. Lionel.
I was initially skeptical of this when I just saw the very brief description of it, and I drove by the property, and it's a beautiful, beautiful property. But with this detailed application, and now that I have a better understanding of what's being requested, I think this is an excellent use of the property that fits within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and I think it would be a benefit to the neighborhood if done right, which it does appear they're going to, and therefore I support it.
Thank you.
I'm not voting on this one, but I think what really makes the property unique, what makes it stand out, is the historic character of it. It's one of the few remaining farm and kind of classic historic farms, you know, farm properties that we have in Nashua. And I think the efforts to preserve the existing home, the barn, as much of the stone wall as possible, the view, I think is compelling. And I think that they have gone through an effort to, you know, from the testimony of the applicant, they've looked at some different configurations, and this appears to be the one that would best preserve the property while allowing them reasonable use.
Thank you.
I pretty much concur with my colleagues, and I think, you know, part of what, the last part of what Mr. Mankar was talking about, I think especially is, and I, you know, explored in my questioning, is it seems that something could be done to go with a public way and have actual individual lots and not have to have any relief from zoning. However, I think that that will actually just do more harm than benefit in terms of maintaining those aesthetics and actually trying to balance out all these other considerations for the way the property is going to be used. So I think in this case, and you know, I appreciate that staff, planning staff, probably went through all of that already with the applicant. So it seems like this is a very reasonable and appropriate solution.
Thank you.
I concur. I think that keeping the barn, keeping the property, keeping the landscaping in front of the other house. This is commendable. They could have gone another way. They took they didn't take the easy way. They took the appropriate and the more aesthetically pleasing way. And they thought of the neighbors, and they thought of the city. And I am in support of this. It's really a good plan. I was like Mr. Lionel, very, back and forth and wondering until I listened and I heard.
I'm also in support of the application. Again, first looking at it, I was wondering why, I was looking at the easy plan, why aren't they doing that, And again, driving by the property, then I was saying to myself, boy, that's gotta kinda look kinda funny if they put like a new house between the existing new houses. So I really appreciate more the detail and description of this, and I think, again, really working hard to preserve kind of what's there. So I'm in full support of the application. Ms. Boris?
I'm also in full support, and I concur with all my colleagues.
Okay. Any more discussion? Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll do it.
Mr. Lionel, thank you.
One moment. This one. Here we are, okay. Like to make a motion on behalf of the owner, Janet Gorges. Applicant is Gottesman and Hollis, PA, address 67 Groton Road. Sheets D, lots 134 and 323, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17B to allow 4 principal structures on one lot, 1 permitted. The board finds that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, the large amount of land, and the desire to maintain the view and other benefits for the public and for the owners. The benefits sought can't be reasonably achieved by some other method. There were various discussions of other possibilities, and the variance is actually, the board finds, the best possible use here. The board finds that this is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We have testimony that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. The board believes it is not contrary to the public interest and that substantial justice would be served, and therefore I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's 5-0. Congratulations, your application's been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll close case number 3. Does everybody else have to keep going? We'll let the room clear out for a minute. Okay. Right, I will open case number 4. Case number 4 is for does anybody have a stab at that? I'm going to apologize ahead of time, as I usually do. Gabalatius. I'm sorry. I will spell it out if anybody needs to. Applicant's Laura Smith, 9 East Pearl Street. Sheet
Come to the microphone and help us.
Sheet 34, Lot 20, requesting use variance from Land Use Code, Section 190-15, Table 15-1, Number 135, to allow a tattoo parlor in a portion of existing building. Zoning district is in the RC zone. Welcome. You give us your name and address.
Nicholas Smith, 246 Daniel Webster Highway, Merrimack.
Laura Smith, same address.
Excuse me, what was your name? I apologize.
Laura Smith.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We apologize. We're having problems, obviously, with the microphone. So if it's better, could you pick up the microphone, just talk into it? That would help us out.
Yep. So, good evening. ladies and gentlemen, neighbors. We are seeking variance in zoning for the purpose of opening a paramedical body art studio, more than just a tattoo studio that most people are used to. We will be offering services such as paramedical and restorative tattoos, as well as cosmetic tattooing, non-laser tattoo removal, body and ear piercing, as well as traditional tattooing. We are a team of established professionals with over 30 years combined experience that have been working in Nashua for over 6 years. Several of us have also participated in events with nonprofit organizations such as Positive Street Arts here in Nashua, the Breast Cancer Awareness Foundation, as well as the Muscular Dystrophy Association, donating services and raising money as well as awareness. We are very community driven. We don't feel like we're going to have any negative impact on the local community by opening a business of this type in the area. I apologize. I haven't spoken publicly in a very long time.
Feel great.
So we work primarily with local residents. That's why, to further ensure safety to the public, we intend to begin a community outreach program where we will visit several high schools in Nashua, teaching students the importance of being tattooed and pierced only by licensed, trained professionals in a clean, aseptic, professional, legal studio. We also will be working with local hospitals as well as plastic surgeons, letting them know that there is a cosmetic and paramedical tattoo artist that will be able to accept health insurance as well as charitable applications, such as things like Pay with a Smile for breast cancer survivors. Our use at this property will observe the spirit of the ordinance, as the health and safety of the public are our utmost concern. It is the biggest part of our job, honestly. We consider it our duty to educate the public and inform every client the importance of safe practices and aftercare methods. That is why every single client leaves our shop with written recommended aftercare instructions as well as a business card with several ways to reach us with any questions, concerns, anything like that. In no way will we alter the character of the neighborhood, as we are a community-based small business that has been providing services to and information to the public in Nashua for, again, over 6 years. We are already working actually just a couple blocks over at Twist Tattoo on East Hollis Street. We've been there for over 6 years. In addition, we have the support of CWE, the Center for Women and Enterprise, a subsidiary of the Better Business Bureau, who recommend that we are approved. Oh, Small Business Administration, my apologies. They recommend we are approved for this variance, as they recognize us as, quote, a viable business with solid financials and a track record for professionalism and excellent customer service. In addition to that letter of support from Nancy Pearson, the director at CWE, we also have received a letter of support from our abutting neighbors at the Nashua VFW. In no way should the value of surrounding properties diminish, as we only plan to maintain and improve upon the physical appearance of the property. Appearance is a big part of our job. We work in aesthetics, so we always want to maintain a professional and clean environment as well as appearance. I guess, is there anything you'd like to add? Another thing is that we don't see that we're going to have any kind of negative impact on the neighborhood, as our business has the potential to earn anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million a year generated revenue. And I guess from this point on, we're open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Lino.
Looking at the application, and I see some copies, excerpts from minutes of past meetings, is part of this building already being used for professional services?
Not to our knowledge.
the property
Well-
owner, Bill Gately.
Can they come up and,
Yeah, we'll have them come up when I ask for people in favor of the application. That's when that'll be appropriate.
So to the best of my knowledge, the answer would be no. We are applying for just the 9A portion of this property. 9 East Pearl Street is currently mostly empty. I believe there is one person that makes jewelry out of part of that property that is renting just a small space in there. But otherwise, 9A East Pearl Street would be otherwise empty. It's just going to be us, and there's no one there currently.
okay, thank you.
Just a question on the business as far as what one would expect. My observation of different tattoo shops that I've seen in the city that I know of never seem to be like crowded or crazy, right? It doesn't seem to ever be like there's lines of people, there's issues with it. I suspect, or you can tell me whether or not what you're expecting for, people coming to your establishment.
It's not incredibly high traffic, as it only requires a few clients a day to make an income that one can live off of or more. So, I mean, typically on any given day we can have from maybe 2 to 3 to 10, 15 clients a day, and that's spanning 9-hour work days. So it's never very high traffic. Nothing that will ever require a large amount of parking spaces. There's a lot of parking right on the street on both sides of the property as well. We do have a sliver lot with 5 spaces as well on the property, which we do share.
And just completely something different, I guess I was never knowledgeable about this paramedical. Is that something relatively new to the area that you're offering, or is that something that other people offer and I'm just not aware of it?
I think most people just aren't aware.
Just your name, please, sorry.
Sorry. I think that most people just aren't aware of it. It's for helping people that have been through body appearance altering situations like breast cancer and stuff like that, to give them part of their identity and aesthetic looks back. It can be used for cleft lips, for breast cancer survivors, even hair loss. We can stipple hairlines in and stuff.
Great, okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? You're all set for now.
Thank you.
Is anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the application? Come on up, just give us your name and address, please.
Sure. It's Bill Gately. I live at 316 Highland Ave in Winchester, Massachusetts. It's a brief introduction. I own the building located at 9 East Pearl Street. I'm here to speak in favor of the application. As a brief introduction to myself, I will say that 4.5 years ago, I didn't own any property in Nashua. Now I own just under 100,000 square feet. I love your city. I think it's going places, and it's been very positive to our portfolio. I find ourselves being very encouraged with what's going on. That being said, I bought this building with minimal to less than optimal use prior to me purchasing the building. It was occupied by an attorney and a number of other small businesses, and the prior owner, which was an architectural company, owned the area that is on the table today for this particular use. I bought the building because it's a beautiful building. Great lines, great architecture, and I think it sits really nicely in proximity to the downtown area. As I thought about possible tenants, and there's been quite a few, my initial meeting with the applicants was positive, but on my 4 or 5 other occasions where I had a chance to vet them, I started to realize that they weren't exactly about being a tattoo parlor. It's more about artists performing work. Not being a big tattoo person myself, it took me a little while to understand that their art and their art form is much more thoughtful than simply a drive-by anchor on the arm situation. And in further vetting the use of the building, I made it clear that there weren't going to be any neon signs, open for business, no walk-in business typically. Most of their appointment business is done just that way. Anytime they would get a walk-in would be more of an inquiry where someone would later come and make an appointment. The setting is very similar to what was once in use there, which was the architectural business. Now, granted, they're not drawing buildings, they're drawing on someone's body. However, the actual stalls that they plan on using are the exact same configuration. You open one's mind and say, well, somewhat similar. The other thing I liked about the applicant was the way in which they approached the business, which is a business. We're here to support businesses that can flourish. The business plan was very good in that it dealt with a number of different ins and outs, I'll call it. The in would obviously be performing body art, but the out would be they also take it off people's bodies who decide not to have a tattoo any longer, which is a tattoo removal. So the fact that they had a distinct plan, it is a business. They are well organized. I supported their application and their move forward to this date. The neighborhood, I believe, does support this as well as a mixed-use area. This would just be another business within it. I know there's been a slight amount of opposition with a hand-delivered letter today from our neighbors at 63 and 65 Temple Street. I find them to be good neighbors. I've toured the building. I'm sure the board knows that it's currently being used as a sober house with multiple people living in it, which isn't your typical one-family, two-family use there. However, it's a creative use of a space. My exact neighbor is currently vacant, which was once a law office, which I think is even proposed to be another multi-occupied sober house. That being said, we expect to have our property maintained at the highest level possible in this mixed-use position. Thank you for the board, and I do support this action.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much for coming. Anybody else in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, so before we go to opposition, I have,
Yes.
okay, so I have Mr. Okay, put this one here, right? Yeah, so Mr. Bill Gately did send in a letter. He did just testify, so we just want on the record that he did send in a letter. And then we also have another letter, and I'll read that into the to the record. Is Dear Carter, this is Mr. Falk. I am a Nashua resident and am managing properties owned by Bill Gately in the city of Nashua. Attaches a letter from Bill regarding the application as submitted by Nick and Laura Smith to operate their business at 9 East Pearl Street. I will be attending Tuesday night's hearing in support of their application. In the meantime, should you have any questions, you can call me. Thank you for your consideration. Russell Bartlett. Okay, so that was the only other thing in support. Right. Right. Okay, so seeing no more, there's nobody else in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the application, correct? Okay, seeing that, anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition to the application? Okay, seeing none, I will read a letter into the record that is in opposition of the application. Dear Sir and Madam, my name is Edward W. Richards. I am the owner and managing member of EB Rich LLC, which owns 2 duplex properties. One of the properties is located at 63 Temple Street, and the second, which is directly abuts the subject property, is located at 65 Temple Street. The neighborhood is primarily multifamily residential properties with a CPA firm, law office, senior center, and small store being the nature of the non-residential uses. There are many children who live in this neighborhood, which is 2 blocks east of Main Street. 1, I do not think that a tattoo parlor will be consistent with the present uses of the surrounding properties, nor is it in the spirit of or consistent with the zoning in this neighborhood district. 2, I believe that its presence will negatively impact a neighborhood that has been going through a slow process of improvement. 3, I believe that this is a non-conforming use in a building directly abutting my residential properties at 63 Temple Street and 65 Temple Street, and will have a negative impact on the value of these properties and my ability to attract tenants. 4, I do not believe that there is any hardship with this land and building that justifies a variance of the applicable zoning in this district to allow permission of this non-conforming tattoo parlor use. For the reasons stated above, please note for the record that my strong objection to the request of an unnecessary and neighborhood-changing use variance at 9 East Pearl Street. Thank you for considerations of my concerns regarding this application. Sincerely, Edward Richards. All right, so that finishes the testimony in opposition. Yeah, so now you could come back and speak in rebuttal, if you like. Of that, you have 5 minutes.
Just to get back to...
Just your name again.
Oh,
sorry.
yes, I'm sorry. Nick Smith. And I apologize, wasn't ready for this. I don't believe that we'll have any negative impact, like he states, as they're going through a slow process of improvement. I like to view ourselves as part of that process of improvement, as opposed to a vacant building there. There will now be a business that is generating revenue. We are quite selective about our clientele. We are not, going to tattoo anyone drunk or inebriated or, of unsound mind and unable to make, these very important decisions. I guess I don't see pretty much everything that he stated in opposition. I feel like we had addressed in our application to begin with. If he were here, I'd like to give him a pamphlet and some information, but I guess I don't need to rebut a letter. So thank you again.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. With that, there is nobody else here to speak. Sir, the procedure is for the applicant only at this point. So there's nobody that spoke here in person in opposition. So with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Just for the record, Mr. Mancara is voting on this case.
Yep, you got it.
From my perspective, I have no problem with the applicants, and I'm sure that they would run an excellent business. But I think it's important to note, a variance runs with the land. It's not personal to the applicant. And I have to say, I agree with the concerns expressed by the abutter in opposition. RC is a residential district. Office uses are allowed as a conditional use, and you can certainly see that in the neighborhood. But when you walk around the neighborhood, there is one, I believe, non-conforming commercial use, but otherwise, there aren't other commercial uses other than what's allowed in the zone. The zone allows for all residential uses, and when I look at the zoning ordinance, tattoo parlors are allowed in multiple other zones, including zones that currently have vacancies on East, we mentioned earlier, East Pearl Street was, West Pearl was mentioned. There's vacancies on West Pearl, there's vacancies on Main Street. There are at least 3 other districts that allow tattoo parlors. So I do think, I don't see anything unique or different about this property that warrants the granting of a use variance.
Thank you. Still on?
I've been going back and forth in my mind about this, but I'm kind of leaning towards what Mr. Mancara said. We have lots of material here about finances and rent and all of that, which none of these things are topics that the zoning board takes into consideration. What it really comes down to is, as Mr. Mancara says, this is a residential zone, and this business, as wonderful as it may be, is not something that the city, the ordinance allows in that zone. And I agree with Mr. Mancara that it doesn't seem to be anything unusual or unique about this property to justify the use variance. So I'm really struggling finding support for this.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of at the same spot. I mean, I think the business sounds like a really good business, and I think they would do quite well to be in any neighborhood, generally speaking. But for the same reasons, I don't know that there's anything that's compelling to basically support this use that's not allowed. So I guess I feel like somewhat like Mr. Lionel was noting, I've been kind of struggling with it because, I think there was some of seeing what this is all about, but I guess I need to be convinced that there's something that really does justify us approving this. And I think it's not so much that it's a tattoo parlor as almost any other use that's not allowed by right or conditional use, that I think it seems like there would be a similar kind of problem with, so.
I've never seen an application for a tattoo parlor be so positive, and I don't mean to be as a negative to the industry, but it was so, detail-oriented, and again, we can't consider the financial aspects of any application, but I think that genuinely the applicant, I think it has a genuine ideal in the business, and, it really there to help people, and I think, obviously did a good job in describing what they want to do and how they're going to help people. So I too was struggling a little bit with, in the zone, and I know the landlord, the owner of the building, did a good job describing, kind of trying to make a relationship with that, and I don't know if it's strong enough. I agree, I understand that, it makes a lot of sense. Again, this is not about, I think the applicant did a great job, I think they would do a great job. I think the concern is, again, is not for them, but what may become of that if they decide to move on, right? So that's really my concern there for the future, and again, as Mr. McCara said, as you said, Mr. Shaw, it's any business that would go in there after the fact, from what we approve. So I have concerns about that. I don't know what's available in other areas. I do know there's a lot of empty space, but that's, there's a reason why they chose this spot, but I didn't hear anything compelling enough, I guess, at this point, to say, yeah, this is the place that makes the best sense, and this is what it's going to be, other than for what, whatever other reason, maybe, it's an attractive rent for them, but again, that's not in our purview. So again, I think the applicant, I again think they present themselves very well, but right now I'm having a hard time supporting this application.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to agree to disagree. We had one letter that had an issue. We had a couple of letters and the owner who were in support. For me, I wonder if it's not the connotation that goes with tattoo parlor that may have some of the negative commentary or impact. I think what I focused on was the health benefits of what this business wanted to do, that they accept health insurance. I don't think there's pretty much any other tattoo parlor that would accept health insurance. So it's a mixed use underneath the title tattoo parlor. I think what they were looking for is something more aesthetically pleasing in that setting, more I guess geared more towards the health aspect of it than anything else. While this doesn't seem or is not considered a residential property, the building is there, the building is open to business, and this for me is a business, and I actually support the application.
What are you sorry for?
I'm different.
No. No, I'll just make a comment that, just kind of triggered me a little bit what Ms. McKay was saying, and, I mean, I agree with exactly what she said also. And in my mind, if I could find a way, if there's a way, or a way we could make a stipulation, and it came to mind trying to narrow the scope of what it is, and stipulation, I don't know if it even makes sense, saying that, that paramedical would be part of what goes with this property. So it couldn't just be a tattoo shop, right? It would have to be something more than that type of idea.
I mean, just to follow up from my perspective, it's irrelevant whether the use is proposed as a tattoo parlor or something different. The reality is that the use that's proposed is not permitted in this district, and there has been no evidence submitted at all that suggests that there's anything unique or different about this property that justifies allowing a use that's not permitted by the ordinance. To me, that there's no hardship. I don't see how there was no evidence presented at all that there's a hardship on the property. And it certainly, and from my view, can't possibly meet the spirit and the intent of the ordinance when it's expressly not allowed.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, and I think the problem is we see, a good business proposal, applicants that are trying to do something that's going to be a net positive for the city and their clientele. And, I think it would be great for Nashua to have them establish their business somewhere here in the city. And I think then what that creates is kind of like, love to just see this work, but I think the reality is, like Mr. Mankara just went through, there's not the justification to say why it should be in an RC zone, so where it's just not allowed. So, and again, it could be some other very beneficial operation that could be before us as well. And I think still would get back to the same thing, that there's not something compelling regarding hardship or why we should be essentially not following the zoning for this property in this case. So I feel really, it's one of those cases I feel bad about, because I think it could be actually a good solution. Maybe it would be great for the neighborhood anyhow, but the reality is our zoning code doesn't allow for it because it's the RC zone. So I don't see a way to overcome that.
Thank you. Any other, Mr. Lionel?
So just to echo what Mr. Shaw said, it sounds like a great business, and I would love to see them operate successfully somewhere in the city. But one of our the reason that we're here is to grant a variance means we need to find some particular good reason to override the city ordinance. And liking the business, that it's got a good business plan, et cetera, those things don't count for overriding the restrictions of the ordinances. So I guess I can't support this.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Anybody want to make a motion?
Okay. I'll do it. Let's see. The owner is Gabhaltais Tegla, LLC, and I probably still butchered that, but best shot. Applicant Laura Smith, the address is 9 East Pearl Street. This is requesting use variance from Land Use Code, Section 190-15, Table 15-1, number 135, to allow a tattoo parlor in a portion of an existing building, and this is in the RC zone. The variance was requested for the applicant's proposed use of the property, but the evidence is not that there is any special conditions of the property, that the benefit can't be sought by other means. So the property still can be used for other uses in the RC zone, and the tattoo parlor is allowed in multiple other zones, so it's not apparent that there is the inability for the property to be used in a way that is allowed for right now. It would not be within the spirit and the intent of the ordinance to allow this usage. There was, I think, a little bit of testimony or concern, but I don't think there's any evidence one way or the other regarding negative effects on surrounding property values. This would not be in the public interest, and substantial justice would not be served to allow this use at this property. So for those reasons, I move to deny this variance request.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mancara. Any discussion? All those in favor of denying the application? That's 4. All those in favor of the application?
So,
Opposed to denial.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All those opposed to denying the application?
I'll go on the
That's
record.
McKay. All right. Thank you. Sorry, your application's been denied. There is a 30-day window of appeal. If you have any questions about that, you can talk to Mr. Falk. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Does anybody need to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we go to the next case. Okay, we're gonna get going again. Like to open case number 5 from Mann Properties LLC, 9 to 11 Worcester Street. Sheets 35, lot 52, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3, for a minimum land area of 10,454 square feet, required 9,278 square feet existing, to convert an existing two-family dwelling into a three-family dwelling unit. It's in the RC zone. Just to note that Mrs. Boris had to excuse herself, so Mr. Minkara will be the voting member. There's 5 of us, so we'll all be voting the rest of the last 2 cases. Welcome.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Zoll. I'm an attorney with offices at 221 Main Street here in Nashua, and I represent George Leokakis, who lives at 7 Columbine Drive in Nashua. George, through his limited liability company, MANH LLC, recently purchased the 2-unit apartment building at 9 and 11 Worcester Street, and he's now requesting a variance to add a 3rd unit in the basement. Now, on 2 separate occasions dating back to the 1980s, this property had previously obtained variances to add the 3rd unit in the basement. In 1977, it was purchased as a 3-unit apartment building. Apparently, sometime prior to 1977, the 3rd unit had been added in the basement without obtaining a variance or necessary permits. That, back in the 60s and 70s, that was not uncommon in Nashua. In the 1980s, it was determined during an inspection or a financing process that was taking place that the basement was not legally permitted. And in 1987, the owner of the property at that time obtained a variance for the 3rd unit in the basement. However, that owner, at that time, never obtained the necessary permits to complete the basement apartment and to bring it up to code. In 2002, the building changed hands again, and the new owner thought that she was purchasing a 3-unit building, but learned that the variance for the 3rd unit had lapsed. In 2003, this board once again granted a variance for the 3rd unit when that owner who purchased it in 2002 applied for the variance. However, that owner never did complete the 3rd unit. She found that it was too costly to do it, so she allowed the variance to lapse. Now, when George Leokakis purchased the building last year, he was aware that it was a 2-unit building. It was advertised as a 2-unit building, and I might add that the assessment records for the city going back to the 70s had listed that as a 3-unit building all along, and the assessment records didn't change until 2009 when it was shown as a 2-unit building. But anyway, when George buys it last year, he's aware of it's a 2-unit building, and he was aware that it had been granted a variance for the 3rd unit in the basement in the past, but they had lapsed. He's now seeking a variance to finish the 3rd unit and do what's necessary to bring it up to code. Now, this property is in an RC zone where multifamilies are permitted. The density requirement for a 3-family dwelling is a lot size of 10,454 square feet, or a density of 3,485 square feet per unit. This property has a lot size of 9,278 square feet, which would result in a density for a 3-unit building of 3,093 square feet per unit, substantially close to the density requirements of the ordinance. Now, I prepared a chart, which I've passed out, that shows the neighborhood from Spruce Street on the east, East Pearl Street on the north, Quincy Street on the west, and Foundry Street and Worcester Streets on the south. This neighborhood is in the RC zone, and it has a mix of single-family, 2-family, and multifamily properties. In this neighborhood, there are 21 multifamily properties ranging from 3 units to 10 units. Not one of the multifamily properties has the required density under the ordinance. You'll see on the first page of the chart, each property has a number in it, which represents the number of units according to the assessment records of the city of Nashua. The multifamily units have all been highlighted in black. The subject property is the property that is blacked out and has a star on it. Thank you, Carter. As shown on the density chart, which is in the second page of the materials I passed out, most of the multifamily properties have densities less than 2,000 square feet per unit, and only one of the 21 multifamily properties has a density that's greater than what's being prepared. And there is a 3-unit building at 6 Quincy Street with a density of 3,187 square feet per unit. It's the only one of the 21 multifamily properties in this neighborhood that has a density that would be greater than what we're proposing, closer to the ordinance, but still deficient from the ordinance. Now, the average density of the multifamily properties in this neighborhood is 1,463 square feet per unit, which is less than half of the density proposed for this property. And now, if you even factor in the lot sizes for all the properties in the neighborhood, including all the single families and 2 families, along with the multifamilies, the average density in that neighborhood is 2,179 square feet per unit, which is still significantly lower than the density that's proposed by the applicant here. Now, granting this variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. The essential character of this neighborhood is multi-unit properties with lot sizes and densities per unit well below what is required by the ordinance. The essential character of this neighborhood will be maintained, and there will be no adverse effects on public safety, health, or welfare. Since the proposed density is so close to what is required by the ordinance, the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance will be maintained. Substantial justice will be done since the 3rd unit will finally be completed and brought up to code, and no harm will be done to either the general public or any individuals in the neighborhood. Surrounding property values will not be diminished since all of the surrounding properties are 2-unit, 3-unit, or greater unit properties with significantly less densities. The addition of the 3rd unit will have no effect on the surrounding properties. Plus, there is ample parking on this property to meet the parking requirements of the ordinance. The pictures that are included with the package show a very wide driveway and 4 garages in the back that are currently used for storage for the tenants, but there's ample parking for the parking requirements under the ordinance, which is 1.5, a minimum of 1.5 per unit. As far as values of properties, we don't need to bring in a realtor or a broker to give you an opinion, and to that effect, this board can take notice of the fact that common sense tells you that there'd be no diminution of value when the surrounding properties are all multi-unit properties with densities far less than what is being proposed. Special conditions exist such that a literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. These special conditions are that the neighborhood is made up of multi-family and multiple unit properties with densities per unit that are significantly less than what's proposed. Restricting this property to a 2-unit dwelling would not serve the purpose of the ordinance in a fair and reasonable way, not when there are so many other properties that have densities and don't comply with the ordinance and have densities far less than required by the ordinance. The proposed use as a 3-family dwelling is a reasonable use as it fits into the character of the neighborhood. And finally, the fact that this variance had previously been granted on 2 separate occasions is evidence that the conditions for a variance existed in 1987 and again in 2003, and those same conditions that justified the variances those past 2 times exist today. I completed my presentation, and I urge the board to grant the variance because I feel strongly that it satisfies all the requirements of the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Minkara?
Any other improvements proposed for the property?
Any other improvements?
Close to the property? other than-
He is going to be fixing up the garage, putting up new garage doors, because they were kind of beat up. But at this point, plus the driveway was recently widened. I think he is preparing to do some more driveway work. Mr. Liakakis couldn't be here tonight because he had to work. He runs Milano Pizza, and they lost a lot of their help tonight, and he had to work. So my apologies that he can't be here to answer those questions, but I asked him that today, and he told me about the garage doors.
You all set, Mr. McCara?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience like to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none, anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? Come on up, give us your name and address, please.
My name is Brian Guidi, 7 and 7.5 Worcester Street, property owner. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. The first question I have is regarding prospective tenants. I'd just like to get a sense for what the property owner's process is for prospective tenants, and whether or not the property owner allows for tenants to sublet the existing units in the building. And then a couple of comments. One is we share a small strip of land between the two homes. It's a walkway for them that goes to their stairs, which is a side entry to their house, which is right outside of our bedroom windows, and occasionally the tenants will park their recycle bins and their trash bins right outside our bedroom windows on our property. So my request would just be that the property owner remind his tenants to be mindful and respectful of abutting property owners' use of the land and use of the property, and keep the trash bins and recycle bins on their own property, or preferably even away from some other side of the house, maybe to the rear where the garage is or something. And then street parking can occasionally be an issue. Occasionally we'll have vehicles parked right at the end of our driveway, and we know that there are people that are visiting that property, and that's perfectly fair. But every once in a while they'll be there when trash collection comes by, and the trash collection will go by because there are vehicles parked right in front of where our trash resides at the end of our driveway. That's all I have.
Any questions? Mr. Shaw?
I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of how supportive you are or not of the actual expansion to a 3-unit from a 2-unit.
I'm not unsupportive. I'm neutral. I believe it's been used since I've resided at 7 Worcester Street, which has been since 1994. I believe there have been tenants in that basement unit during the times that I've been there. It hasn't affected my quality of life. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that are a curiosity for me.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Mr. Shaw? Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak with questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? Seeing none? 5 minutes.
For the record, Jeffrey Zoll, attorney for the applicant. I can't speak to the process that the applicant will use for vetting prospective tenants or whether tenants are allowed to sublet. I can tell you that I have been representing Mr. Liakakis for a number of years. He has purchased a handful of buildings in Nashua and Hudson. He is a very good landlord, and I'm certain that when he vets his tenants, he makes sure that the tenants are not the tenants who are going to cause trouble for anybody. George is a businessman in Nashua, been a very successful businessman for many years, and I see that he's becoming a very successful and diligent landlord. As far as the trash the trash bins that are being put on the walkway that is common to both properties, I will tell George and will accept it as a condition of the approval, if you deem it appropriate, that trash bins be kept on the other side of the property. As you can see from the pictures that I submitted, the left side of the property has plenty of room for the trash bins. Why they're on the right side of the property, I don't know, and I would certainly have a problem with that. And I think that George, the owner should require that trash bins all be kept on the left side, where there's plenty of room for that. As far as parking, as you can see from the pictures, there's ample parking both in front of the garage and in the driveway on the left side of the building, so parking should not be an issue. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Sir, you have 5 minutes if you'd like to come back and speak. It's up to you whether or not you want to or not. Just your name and address again.
Brian Guidi, 7 and 7.5 Worcester Street. Just for the record, those answers are appropriate and reasonable to me. I would be in favor of the proposal.
All right, thank you. No questions? Okay. Okay, that ends our public hearing. I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. I'll start off. I'm in support of the application. I think there is, again, with this is, not unique, but there is a history of this unit existing have been used as a three-family. And there was testimony, which I'm sure is absolutely accurate, that, again, it was, not that it matters, but it was taxed as a three-family, it was used as a three-family. We have the neighbor who substantiated the fact that there was people living there, whether it was at the time it was legal or not, but there was, a unit that existed there. I believe that there's absolutely plenty of parking, so again, no issues there. I do appreciate the fact that I agree the trash bins, there's plenty of room to put on the other side, and I would make that as a stipulation to the application. So, going back to the presentation, I think that we all can see, or I can see, that it is really a multifamily neighborhood, and I think it does fit into this neighborhood, and the lot certainly supports it. It is just slightly under, for total square footage, we're looking at approximately, 750 on the total square footage required. I don't think that I would visually maybe pick that up. I think that, it would fit right in, size-wise, and it would look appropriate. So I would be in support of the application. Mr. Lionel.
I concur with Mr. Boucher. The record showing that this board has granted the variance multiple times, and the requested density relief is minor, especially compared to rest of the neighborhood. I'm in support of this application.
I'm also in support of the application. I will say I was a bit on the fence when I walked around the neighborhood and saw that, really the abutting properties were all two families, as this is, but the lot is oversized for a two-family in this neighborhood. But for me, the kicker is a history of variances that have been granted. I have to believe that the zoning boards that granted relief to this property in the past were doing so based on the criteria. So for me, that was a deciding factor.
I had many similar thoughts. I think the other thing as well for me is that there is no change in footprint, no additional structures or additions. So from a kind of presence of the structure, there won't be anything that's noticeably different. So I think that's also kind of key and kind of some of the factors in consideration of what has already been said.
Ms. McKay?
Yeah, I concur. I'm in support of the application. Like has been stated before, numerous variances have been granted. The neighbor stated that when he first took possession of his property, there was somebody already living in that apartment, so it was done that way. It was assessed that way until, I think he said 2009, and that's what the attorney said. So I find support for this.
Okay, anybody like to make a motion? Okay, I'll make the motion. I'd like to make a motion for owner man properties of 9 to 11 Worcester Street, sheet 35, lot 52, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3, for a minimum land area of 10,454 square feet required, 9,278 square feet existing, to convert an existing two-family dwelling unit into a three-family dwelling. It's in the RC zoning district. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. We did discuss the fact that this home had been operated as had been a three-family, had been in use as a three-family. We also spoke to the fact that previous boards found it in purview to approve it as a three-family. We also noted that there is no physical changes to the footprint of the home. There is going to be some improvements to the garages to bring them up to a better-looking condition. So again, this is a property that has operated as a three-family, has been taxed for many years as a three-family, so it's existing use, and the size is a very large lot for a two-family, and again, we find that it's a minimal shortage on the square footage to bring this back to a three-family. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. We find that it's not contrary to public interest. We find that substantial justice will be served. One special condition that we are placing on this variance is that all trash will be kept on the left side of the property, so therefore no trash to be kept between the abutting home on the right. I forgot the address number, but there's a
7 and a half.
7 and 7.5. There's no trash containers to be kept between this property at 911 Worcester Street and 7 and 7.5 Worcester Street. So with that, I make a motion to approve the area variance. Seconded by Ms. McKay. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's 5-0. Congratulations, your application's been approved. Thank you. Thank you. With that, I'll close case number 5, and we'll open case number 6. Case number 6 is owner Albert and Marilyn Todd of 4 Greeley Street, sheet 67, lot 60, requesting the following variances. 1, from Land Use Code, Section 190-16, Table 16-3 for land area 5,597 square feet existing, 18,669 square feet required. And 2, from Land Use Code, Section 190-17, subsection B, to allow 2 principal structures on 1 lot, 1 permitted. Both request to add 2 multifamily units in an existing barn. It's in the RB district. Welcome. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Marilyn Todd. My address is 4 Greeley Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. Well, sorry. All right, sorry. Good evening. My name is Marilyn Todd. I am a born and raised Nashua native. In fact, the only time not living in Nashua was when I joined the Navy, where I met my husband. After I left the Navy, we bought 4 Greeley Street, which we have owned for over 7 years. Our goal is to restore the barn into a 2-family structure, making the overall property a 3-family with 2 different structures. I think it's best to start with the current condition of the barn. This is a 200-year-old barn that has very limited life left, if not restored soon. We are here today to ask to save this barn. This barn is a huge part of Nashua's history. In fact, it was conceded to be the best equipped milk house in the state. This ad is from the Nashua Telegraph from January 18th, 1909. As the ad proves, the intended use of this barn was for commercial use. It wasn't until hiring a structural engineer did we realize how dilapidated the barn really is. There are no sill plates or anything for that matter connecting the barn to the 4 feet of granite foundation. Also, one of the main beams isn't even touching one side of the house. The structural engineer has expressed concerns for blizzard or hurricane-like conditions. Honestly, after the discussion I had with the engineer, regardless of the barn, I had with the engineer regarding the barn structural integrity, we have banned our children from going in it. As you can also tell from the pictures, the barn is sloping and rotting. The good news now, the barn has a chance to be restored, and here's a picture of the first step that needs to be done sooner than later. The barn will be supported from the inside, and the cement cap will be poured and the sill plate installed. We do not have the structural framing plans, but spoke to the structural engineer this morning, who promised them by Monday the latest. However, I know that the building permit and the planning board will address those issues. If the structural engineer has expressed his concerns for the structural integrity, then that the danger it possesses to the neighborhood, this should not be ignored. The Historic District approved our plans, ensuring it conforms to the neighborhood. As you can tell from the map, my immediate neighborhood mainly consists of multifamily properties. In fact, the single-family houses only account for 28% of the neighborhood. This application is very similar to the approval of 14 Abbott Street. 14 Abbott Street sits directly across the street from my house. The zoning board approved the variance from a single-family to a multifamily conversion on 9/26/2017. The board agreed that trying to sell a single-family home in an area that is predominantly multifamilies would be more difficult. They also agreed that the density in my neighborhood for multifamilies is similar, and that it is a denser part of the RB zone. I have supplied the average density of my immediate neighborhood, which proves the density of my houses, if approved, would conform to the density of the neighborhood. And as you can see, the average density of the 35 properties that are highlighted on the first map is 0.044. Our density would be, if approved, 0.05. So, I mean, there's a lot that it varies between, it varies every lot. The board, in the case of 14 Abbott Street, agreed that although the existing square footage that does not meet current code, but is generally consistent with the existing multifamilies in the neighborhood. One of the only difference in Mr. Crowley's case is that we hadn't been in front of the board multiple times or worked on multiple properties. He was solely an investor. However, we occupy this residence with our 3 kids. Sorry. And my argument is However, we occupy this residence with our 3 kids, and my argument to the lack of experience in restorations is the personal aspect. This is our home, which we care for deeply. I honestly hope this property stays in our family from generation to generation. We are not trying to flip this property. As you can tell from the CMAs, we will actually be losing some of the built-up equity we have acquired, as this project is estimated to cost between $185,000 to $200,000, only increase in our appraised value by about $100,000. To be completely honest with you, we have outgrown this house. However, if approved, as you can tell by the hit of the equity we will be taking, we have no immediate or future plans of selling this property. Therefore, hopefully providing this board a guarantee all renovations will be in compliance with any building codes and regulations. We have also, in the past 2 years, completely renovated our main house, putting in about $45,000. We were all in compliance with building codes and regulations. I have on hand the permits if you'd like to review. It would be an injustice to not only the barn, but the overall property value to approve 14 Abbott to a multifamily, but not 4 Greeley Street. This barn is roughly between all 3 floors, 3,600 square feet, almost doubling the size of the main property. As seen earlier, the intended use of this structure was for commercial use. The main house of this property is nothing short of a starter family house by definition. It will be detrimental to this property value for the deteriorated barns who have no beneficial use. It is going to be very difficult to ask $330,000 for my property, which it was recently appraised at, when it will cost $50,000 immediately to make this barn structurally sound. As an accountant, and my husband a mechanical engineer employed by Raytheon, we are struggling to invest the $50,000 into a structure that has no use. Any average family that would buy this property, I can guarantee, will find the same hardship. For the variance of the 2 structures on 1 lot, we are working with the cards this property came with. If this barn did not exist, we would not be here today, as I wouldn't try making even my main house into a two-family, but it does exist, so we are here, and we are hoping to give this property the justice it provided to us by the significant increase in equity over the past 7 years and to restore Nashua's milk house. It took us over 7 years to acquire the equity this barn needed to be restored, and if so, there is no guarantee the new owners would be able to provide the structural integrity this barn so desperately needs. This barn has been sitting with no repairs, I'm assuming since the 1970s. I can't stress enough the very limited life this barn has left. I also want to add, with all due respect, if the foundation cannot be fixed, if the foundation cannot be fixed by winter, we have no other choice but to list the house for sale as it is as soon as possible. As stated earlier, as an accountant, I can't justify putting $50,000 into a building just to look at it, and I'm sure any other consumer would agree. We are asking that the board help us save this historic landmark and let us renovate the barn into the only logical use and turn it into a multifamily property. For convenience purposes, we have supplied a parking plan. The prior mentioned approved variance requested 14 Abbott Street was half the driveway in size at best than this property has. Also, the abandoned family next door has less driveway space than my property at 4 Greeley Street. In the provided picture, you will see a 21-foot RV, an Acura MDX, a Ram 1500 quad cab, my neighbor's Honda CRV, a Mazda 3, and a 14-foot trampoline, and a My Box storage. That's not even using the driveway around the bend of the house. Hashtag save the barn.
You all set?
I just,
You still have some time if you need to.
I mean, I just think it would be, really sad to see, the barn come to this, as you see on the screen. And this is like a replica of my barn. My barn even used to have that little steeple on it, from pictures I've researched from the 1800s. I think I'm done.
You good? Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicant? No? Okay, your application was pretty thorough.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience that'd like to speak in favor of the application? Come on up, give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is Kevin Whitaker, and I live right down the street at 45 Amherst Street. It's actually now 16 Artillery Lane. I changed the address from the front door to the back door just because that's how I access the property. And I think I have a house that very, very recently went on the market, and I enjoyed the building. I mean, they're less than a quarter mile down the road, and I think it would be a shame to let it go to waste. I mean, you can put the money they're talking about putting into it is significant, and that's just going to increase the property value of all of the surrounding properties, and I think it'll be something good for the space and good for that area of town. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much for coming. Yep. Anybody else like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, seeing none. Anybody with questions, concerns, or opposition to the application? Come on up, give us your name and address. You might want to lower that mic.
My name is Willie Singsey. I reside at 11 Merrimack Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. Been there since 1994. I'm happy they can fix up the barn. I'm not happy about density of the population in the area. Since I've been living there, I've been pressed by the cop in front of my house. People block my driveway. People have been killed on the Merrimack Street, shot in daytime. And their house, the barn is next to my driveway. It's about 5 feet away. And there's a fire on number 13 on my Go down Merrimack Street, would be number 13. There's a fire escape hanging on my property. And I cannot park my car there too much because it's the right of way for the safety. And they're gonna put they're gonna build something, they can put a fire escape next to my driveway again. And I cannot put up the fence, it's because a right of way. So when something happened, everything run down to my driveway. And I don't know who's gonna come in my driveway, day or night. And sometimes I have a cut over, I don't know who it is. Now and then I have to be careful. It's called liability. Yeah, I'm happy gonna fix up. I have no problem with that, but I'm worried about liability. 5 years, 6 years ago, I smoked my turkey, Thanksgiving, somebody called EPA on me. We have a lot of problem in our neighborhood. Last year, October, I got a ticket parking in my driveway, 12 inches hanging over the sidewalks, obstruction of the sidewalks, they call it. But everybody park randomly. It's not the homeowner that park like that, it's a visitor. Homeowner always cannot fight and argue about it. I always out there, hey, don't you know it's a driveway? They say, I did not know. I've been arguing with it all my life, living there. I can't afford anywhere else's. I bought my house, an old house. Started living peacefully. But what I got is imposed. No one seemed to understand because, when you buy a house, you should have a freedom. But my freedom is, hey, what are you doing in my land? What are you doing in my yard? I raised my kid there. I don't want to walk my neighborhood. My wife walked the neighborhood. I don't want to walk because I'm afraid. I get in my car, I ride my bike. I've been living there, I had a lot of problems. I see a lot of problems. I see people there drunk in front of my house. Not people who are living there, but a lot of people. Look out the window, guess what? 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Yo, I see a guy got hit by the hammer in front of my house. Density. Populations overgrow. When I moved here, there were a couple set of lights. Now it grow. Everywhere we go, every block we got a light. Now we got stack up, just like Boston. It's getting bigger and bigger. We're getting smaller, we're not expanding. We think we expand, but we're not. Our city getting smaller, and our tax going higher. Doesn't help nothing. I can't even throw a 2x4 in a trash can this day because that construction stopped. The old day, the guy just pack up in a paper box. The garbage man just picks it up. Now the garbage man just dump my trash on the sidewalks. Say, it's construction.
Time's
Yeah,
almost
no
up. Time's
problem.
almost up, sir.
Excuse me?
Your time is
Oh,
up.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you very much for coming. Okay. Ma'am, sir, you have 5 minutes to speak in rebuttal. Excuse me, there's nobody else in the audience to speak in opposition, so I just want to make that clear. So, ma'am, come on up, you have 5 minutes to speak.
I just wanted to say that, we call him V. We've always been very friendly, and, I can assure him that, I hold, people to the highest standard, that, I wouldn't, the level of people we would be renting to would be held to the same standard that my own kids would be. If they act out of control, or if they, if they, if they're not gonna respect the house and the neighbors, then that's gonna be an issue with me, and I can assure V of that, and we've always had a really good relationship. I promised V I wouldn't put any windows on the back of the barn, and there's no windows on the back of the barn, to respect him and his privacy, and I thought that was important. So, when we designed these plans, he was someone we directly thought about. I specifically said to the structural engineer that I didn't want, any windows in the back of my house. So any way I can respect my neighbors, I will. And I don't know.
Ma'am, can I interrupt for a minute? I made an error in procedure, so I'm going to give you 3 more minutes after I'm done. I just need to read a letter into the record that I forgot in opposition.
Okay.
And then, just in case you want to comment on something there, and I do apologize. So let me just go back, and there was one letter of opposition that I forgot that was sitting here. Quickly read this into the record. It's from Brandon Husky, 4 Greeley Street. Kate, who works in the planning office. As we spoke about this morning, I want to list a few questions and concerns I have with the variance request for the property at 4 Greeley Street, but cannot attend the zoning meeting due to prior engagement. I am Brandon, and I live at the property around the corner of 12 Merrimack Street. From my understanding, the variance is looking to grant 2 exceptions to allow the owner to add 2 new units of living space to the existing barn on the property, but worry that this will be too many people for the space due to lack of parking. Currently, the people living in the house park their cars at the vacant property next door, and that is without any additional living units on the premise. I worry that adding more people to the property will cause parking to affect adjacent streets, as Greeley is too small for people to park on the side of the road. If the intent is just to add 1 more unit to the property to a total of the house and 1 unit in the garage, I think the parking in the bottom of the garage or more parking space, this could all fit. I just worry if the property has total 3 units on it, that it will cause issues in surrounding neighbors with parking. Thank you, Brandon. All right, so that was letter in opposition. Again, I apologize. So we'll make sure that you have your time.
All right, so all the issues that V stated weren't applicable to us. We've had a very friendly relationship. None of the parking, it would be irrelevant for anybody that would come to my house park on Merrimack Street. It's never happened. I've never parked on Merrimack Street. I have parked at the abandoned buildings that are right across the street and to the side, because we've had to call the cops for squatters. So people have actually asked us, Mr. Crowley actually, well, his people, not him specifically, but when they were renovating 14 Abbott Street, they were like, keep parking here because it's helping, it's not allowing, squatters in. We're surrounded by abandoned properties, and the 4 units their doors are broken into all the time, like kicked in, and they haven't since we've been parking there. And so yes, we utilize, it's right there, it's on our street. So obviously when 14 Abbott Street became livable, we're not affected. We haven't been affected. We don't touch their driveway. I mean, but that was one of we would randomly park there sometimes, or our guests. But I mean, I showed you the parking plan, and and I just hope that anything I can do to avoid any issues with any of the neighbors, then I'm very open to resolving the issues and coming up with a plan. But I mean, I think the parking is more than suitable for our property.
My name's Albert Todd. I reside at 4 Greeley Street. I just wanted to also address the fire escape issue that V brought up. The fire escape will not fall on his property line at all. It's going to fall on our property line, and we provided the drawings in the PowerPoint presentation that we provided. And as far as the positioning of how his barn is and his driveway is unfortunately the cards that we've been dealt. And we've tried to be as respectful to V as all of our neighbors in the area, and I hope that is taken into consideration when we speak to the kind of quality of people that we're going to be renting to and the things that we will allow and will not tolerate at our property. And I think that's all I had. That's it.
Any questions? Ms. McKay?
One question, these plans, are they the current accurate plans as proposed?
On the PowerPoint?
That we have in our packet?
I'm not sure, I sent them in on Friday. I'm not sure if the same thing happened last night, happened tonight. I looked earlier and they weren't updated.
These were sent out to us over a week ago, so they probably, if you change them, they're not accurate. But you said the presentation ones, these were accurate right here?
Yes, those are accurate. The only thing that had to be updated was the 5.5 corner board. The structural engineer wasn't able to give me that today, but that's the only,
That was a part of the approval process
Yeah,
for
for
the
the
historic
historic
board,
board.
that we put the 5.5
Yeah.
inch corner board on there.
So, from what I understand from Mr. Falk, the historic board did approve with specific language. There were some stipulations would come right down from shingles to doors to windows. Go, Mr. Falk?
They just went last night, so they're, the HTC had several specific conditions of approval. One was the siding, 4-inch barn red color vinyl siding that's textured, white 5.5-inch corner boards on fire escape, same as the 15 Merrimack Street property, metal fire escape. The roof wasn't gonna be changed, other than just to install black architectural shingles to match the existing. The windows and doors were specific part numbers that the clerk wrote down at HTC last night. The numbers really won't mean anything, but, you know, but we do have the part numbers. The door is F63042, and the window is 2854786G, per the specs that they provided from Home Depot. And they also stated that any changes from that plan would have to go back before the HTC.
All right, thank you.
I would have gave you the approval letter, but we're still processing it, because, I mean, they're not even 24 hours old.
Question. Your neighbor that lives behind you, kind of kitty corner, talked about, in general, about the density in the neighborhood. So, kind of quickly talk to me, just where you're at with the density, because what we're looking at here is an application that is very high density. So, just kind of, how do you justify that density in the neighborhood you're in, your particular neighborhood?
So basically, I took each, from the assessor's website, if you can pull that slide up. I took and I basically took their land size and, divided by, the number of units, and that's how I got that spreadsheet. And basically, it's, can I see it? Basically, it's all over the place. I made the, oops.
So it's what you testified to earlier, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, correct. So it's in conformity. There's one house that has 22 units on this.
So just let me ask you, maybe I'll ask you a more specific question. Maybe that will help. Any of those properties that you know of have two separate structures on it?
The one right next door to me, the abandoned one, that's directly.
Has two separate structures, right?
Two
But
separate
one's-
structures.
One's being used as residence.
It's abandoned, but it's four-family, yeah, on two different structures. So it's a single-family house, exactly like mine set up.
Yeah.
It's a single-family house, and then the unit that's behind it is a three-family. So there's 4 units total.
Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to know.
Sorry.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions, Ms. McKay?
Clarification, nobody's living in that property, either one of those properties, it's abandoned.
Either one, HUD owns them from what I read on the assessor's website. And they've been abandoned for 6 years now.
That's a really long research garage to see if they can use it like that.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Okay, we're all set. Thank you. So with that, I will close, oh, sorry.
The gentleman who objected.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sir, you have 5 minutes to come back if you want to say anything. If you want to say something, you have your name and address? Your name and address again?
Wilai Singh C, 11 Merrimack Street, Nashua, 03064. Thank you. About the fire escape, if you move it, you're gonna build it, you can
You
move it away
could,
from that.
sir, you could address us? Yeah. So we can.
You just talk to my neighbor.
Yeah.
You can move it to a little further away from the land, because if you come down there, there's no fence. Whatever it is, the kid will come down. Whoever lived there, they come down, they go in my yard. I'm concerned about that. I don't want nobody cut through. And also, as you see, they show they have no parking space. It's climbing a little piece. He been parking over there, he been park over there. He doesn't park there because it's lack of parking space in that neighborhood. But I'm happy they're gonna fix it up. But I'm concerned about population, density. No parking space. That's all. Thank you. You have a good night.
Any questions? Thank you very much for coming. So with that, I'll close the public hearing now and open the public meeting.
I'm not sad. It's allergies. I mean, I'm not kicking it off. In full disclosure, this is my neighborhood. I'm not in a butter, but I've lived in this area for a long time. I know it very well. And I struggled with this one a bit, but I would say that, this is, perhaps the oldest part of Nashua. Pretty much, there's just about, there are very few, if any, properties in this neighborhood that conform to current zoning requirements. They're all over the place. They don't conform to density requirements. They don't conform to setback requirements, lot size, shape. I mean, pretty much you name it. It's very difficult to apply the ordinance to this area. I think what jumps out at me and what makes this property stand out is the fact that it does have this historic barn on it. I mean, it's an odd-shaped, small lot, but there are a few other ones in the neighborhood that also have barns like this, and I think their fate is all the same. Either they can be put to some sort of productive use, or we're going to lose them. For me, I commend the applicant's willingness to restore the barn. I think it's an important part of the neighborhood. And to do that requires a significant investment, and I can see why they want to put 2 units in there, because it's hard to come up with something that could justify that cost. So although why I do struggle with it somewhat, and I appreciate the comments about density, about parking, those are issues. Definitely those are challenges in this neighborhood. Abandoned buildings are also a challenge in this neighborhood. Lack of investment is a challenge in this neighborhood. And I think, while I appreciate those concerns, putting a significant investment like this into this area, I think overall would be a net positive. So for that reason, for those reasons, I'm supportive.
Mr. Lionel.
I don't have anything to add to what Mr. Mancara said, that, the density is not out of character for the neighborhood, and this is a, if not exactly unique, it's certainly a very unusual property that has special conditions, and this is an excellent use for the property. I hear some concerns from neighbors about parking and some other things, but I believe that the applicants will work to mitigate those. The fact that they are living on the property and not absentee landlords makes a big difference, at least as long as they own the property. Admittedly, this is a variance that runs with the property, but I am in support of the application.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I mean, I think just especially the challenge, but generally the uniqueness of this barn structure just makes it very compelling. I mean, I think short of somebody having desire to live at that property and make that barn into something functioning like a giant wood shop or something that was, you know, there's very little I can think of that you could do with a structure like that and the amount of investment required. And I commend the applicant's, you know, proposal here. But I think truly the barn and trying to preserve it and keep the historic aspects to it is sufficient justification to me for the density, and again, the fact that it's not like it's going to be so different from a lot of what else is going on in this area. I think at least there's should be ability to accommodate the parking, and I pretty much concur with everything else my colleagues just said.
Ms. McKay?
I concur, and I think that I would go along with this, but my biggest concern was a comment from the neighbor. The fire extinguisher, the fire escape, coming down and ending up on his property. That's a liability for the neighbor, not for the property owner. And so, for me, there would have to be something that would ensure that that fire escape in no way came near that property, so that if somebody was having to use it and come out, they didn't go out, end up on the neighbor's property, and then there's a liability issue if somebody gets injured. That's my concern.
So I think, I may be incorrect, but I think the neighbor was talking about his neighbor, not this particular neighbor, in the driveway, which is not this property. I think the testimony is that the fire escape will be away from his property line, so there is no problem there. I think there may be a misunderstanding with the neighbor that the fire escape will be used as a regular egress entrance, and that's just not the case. So, because he was concerned about children coming down there, that's what I understood. But I think the fire escape issue was with the gentleman that lives on Merrimack Street. When he drives in his driveway, there's a fire escape kind of in the way from his neighbor, not these people, not this
Oh, I
applicant.
thought he had said
Yeah.
it was on one side, and then this one would be on the other side.
Well, he was assuming that it would hang off the back or something, but it's not where it's gonna go.
Okay.
So, so help me with this, because just the way I'm looking at this, and just help me. So the only thing I was looking at is this second structure on this lot, right? And I really appreciate, Mr. McCary, that you're very familiar with this neighborhood, because, I thought across the street it was something similar, but it's not, and so I'm just trying to understand, because I really respect how you're looking at this, this part of town, and tell me, help me to get over that hump, that second structure on such a small lot. And I'm understanding more, because you're saying this is the oldest neighborhood, but convince me that this is all good, the second structure. It's not attached, right? It's not like it's a one home that we're adding 2 more units.
So I guess I would say this property right here,
Yeah.
that's the one with 2 principal uses on the same one. So this was a single-family home, and this was a multifamily on the same lot immediately next door to them.
Right.
So that's at least one example in the area. But I think, to me, the other factor is just that it's not new construction that's proposed. This is an existing barn. So here we have the building. What do you do with it?
So, and how do you feel about the 2-family? I mean, if you're comfortable with that? I'm not signaling you, I'm just having a conversation. In that neighborhood, adding 2 more families, what's your opinion on that?
I guess I'd have to separate my personal view of it. I would look at it as, probably necessary to support the investment is to get 2 units in there. Is the density itself out of character? No. it's not, because there's a lot of higher density properties in the area. Very close by too, you've got a pretty significant multifamily, if I'm looking at the map. Right at, what's 18? I mean, that's a large multifamily elderly housing, I believe. 14 is 4 units. I mean, I wouldn't go run through all of them, but you've got a number that are pretty dense. So the density itself, I don't think, is out of character with the area. The 2 principal uses on one lot is unusual, without question, but again, there is another example immediately next door.
Okay. And again, I'm not signaling you out, just guess you.
I hear you.
What would your, regardless of whether or not we're looking at a different type of application, what would your feeling be if the applicant came and said, I want to knock that barn completely down and build something brand new there, in its footprint, the exact footprint?
That would, for me, that would completely change my viewpoint.
Right.
Because it's the existing structure, to me, that's compelling. New construction, no.
So with that, my thought was, and I don't know if it's viable or what you think, because this is going to go forever, right? With that, would when we make a motion, maybe somebody can help me. If this motion is to approve, I guess in my view, my simple view, I just want to prevent any new construction from happening. And so I don't know if it's necessary to put some type of stipulation in the motion or not. I just want to make sure that if I were to be an approver, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Well, since it is in the historic district, just to take this barn down, that would still require historic district review, review and approval by them. You can't just take it down without HDC review and approval, because it is a building permit. You have to have a demolition permit. You have to cut utilities and water, and there's a lot of safety precautions that have to go in with keeping the building safe. So that does require a building permit right off the bat, and HDC. There's also part of our code that since this is a non-conforming structure, it's encroaching onto a couple setbacks. We would have to have the building inspector go out and inspect it, and they would have to put something in writing that the building is unsafe, or it's damaged by an act of God or weather or something. Because otherwise you can't just build back in a non-conforming setback like that.
I have a question then. With this building, the applicant stated that it was ready to fall down, it was structurally unsound. So does that mean they would have to take it down and rebuild it? Because I struggle with this application. I have to be honest, I struggle a great deal with this. And it's my neighborhood too. My husband's grandparents lived on Merrimack Street. So this is a struggle. These are abandoned, they're empty. I get the density, and I get that neighborhood, and it is jam-packed.
Well,
So they're going to maintain the principal structure, right? Well, most of it, right? They're just going to.
They've attested they can repair the structure. It can be kind of left in place and repaired in place, and people can do that. There's ways of supporting a structure with jacks and hydraulic lifts and things, and shore up a foundation. I mean, we've had numerous older houses in the city that have redone their whole basement, their whole foundation, and the house just stays there. That can be done. So they can repair it in its place. But if they take the whole thing down, that's going to require HDC review and approval, and of course the building permit to do so. And we'd have to have something from the building inspector stating that there's a valid purpose for taking it down, which means it would be unsafe, or it's damaged by lightning or fire or something that makes it unfit for people to walk into. So that's the only kind of reasons why they could take it down. And that's going to have to be, they just can't do it. They would have to get HTC review and approval and a building permit and a letter from the building inspector.
But that's not what they want to do. They want to,
Right.
they want to
They wanna keep it in
restore it.
place.
with approval of the HDC.
And that's something that the building department, the building safety department, is also encouraging them to make this building safe for human occupancy, and that people can live in it safely, and there's safe electric and plumbing, and you know, people can live above one another. There's fire-rated walls, fire-rated ceilings, fire-rated doors. All the applicable building code issues or housing code issues have to be met. They're still gonna have to go to the planning board, should this board support this. This also requires a conditional use by the planning board. So they're gonna have to come up with a plan, a site plan before the planning board. So, and there's also gonna be some very detailed building plans that will also have to be submitted to the building department as well. As with any structure that's never been used for a residential purpose, to go to 2 units, one on top of one another, there's some pretty significant plans that they'll have to submit. So we do want the structure to be, you know, safe for anybody and everybody, whether it's a contractor or a person working on it, the owners, their children, anybody. That's a given. You know, I know.
With the HDC, Mr. Lionel, last night, it was only the aesthetics. The HDC did not look at they can't. We can't. I sit on the HDC. We can't look at that. All we can look at is the aesthetics. We struggled with this not having an accurate plan. This was not cut and dried and very easy, and it's probably going to change some of the things the HDC does from this point out. This is a desire to see a structure that has so much historical value remain. However, the impact on the neighborhood and on everything else is huge. And so we could only look at the aesthetics. That's all we could do. Here, we're looking at the impact, and they're very, very different.
And the only thing I wanted to do is protect the interest of this barn, so basically for the future, because, you know, quite honestly, the applicant was quite honest. Look, if we get into it and it's just way too expensive, or there's major problems with it, we're just gonna sell the house. But there's a variance there, right, that sits in place, right? So I just want to make sure, it sounds like the protections are in place. There's a lot of steps that would happen, you know, that, and if something would happen in between, it looks like they would be in some violation, whoever, whether it's the applicant or somebody else, would be in violation of that code. So I just wanted to hear that the city is protected and that this decision is protected as it sits. That's all I wanted to make sure. So it sounds like that. So that's it. Yeah.
They can, you know, there's a lot of different options here, a lot of different avenues that they could go down, you know, through board approvals or denials or their own personal way of treating this barn. Say this does get supported and it also gets supported by the planning board, there's all the obvious building permits and site plan. If this isn't supported, you know, we would not want to see I don't think the city would be in favor of them just tearing this down. They could still repair it. It can still be repaired. And most of the things that were approved at the HDC can still happen. The issues here are completely with people living in it. The 2 principal structures means that there's 2 families living in 2 different structures on one lot. The density is 2 additional units added into this building where there's already 1, so there's 3 livable units on this property. If they just fix the barn up, put in new windows, redo the roof, put on the new siding, you know, fix it up aesthetically, you know, the HDC doesn't look at the interior of the building. They could still do all those things on the exterior, but just not have the units inside. So we would, you know, obviously the city would be supportive of that because no one wants to see a barn or any structure that's unsafe and that they wouldn't want their family to walk into.
But I think it's more than that. It's also structural. It's not just aesthetics,
Right.
It's structural.
And that goes along with.
Right, but I think for me, the investment that would be necessary to accomplish that exceeds the value of the building as what? A storage shed. I mean, that's the whole reason why I think the application is here.
I mean, they probably don't want to put in the six-figure amount of money just to fix this up and make it, safer and look nice. I mean, they obviously want to have a return on their investment with the units, but that's not something that this board can look at. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any other discussion? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Shaw, before you do this, there's two separate variances. Are you going to make a motion for one and then the other? How is that going to be? Because just for me, for recording purposes.
I'd like to just do them both together, but is that?
They're both dimensional, really.
Okay, I wrote them as two separate, but I will.
I think you can do them together.
Okay.
It's not like they're use. It's not like a special exception in a variance or a use in a dimensional. They're both really numerical with the density and the two principal structures. I guess you could.
No, it's fine. I'll just go with what you're saying and write it accordingly.
If I could make a suggestion, to maybe reference the HGC approval and the stipulations to the specific language that will be in that, whatever it said. Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of owners Albert and Marilyn Todd for Greeley Street, requesting two variances, and this motion will be to treat both variances together. The first one being from Land Use Code, Section 190-16, Table 16-3, for land area where 5597 square feet are existing and 18,669 square feet are required. And secondly, from Land Use Code, Section 190-17B, to allow two principal structures on one lot, one permitted. Both requests are to add two multifamily units and existing barn, and this is in the RB zone. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. By far and away, the special conditions of the property are the old historic barn and trying to find a means to make that structure viable and structurally sound and safe, and that the applicant's proposed use cannot be achieved by some other reasonable method other than this variance. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. There's no testimony that, or I think belief that there'll be significant or notable property value effects on surrounding parcels, certainly negatively. If anything, it seems that it might be a net positive because of the investment being made to the property. It would not be contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. We'll note that the Historic District Commission had just met yesterday, July 22nd, and that we do not have the formal list, but there will be a number of stipulations and requirements that we will implement as part of this motion as well, that those requirements be followed. And with that, I move to approve these two variances.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lionel. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? 5-0. Congratulations, the application is approved. Have a good night. With that, I'll close case number 6. We have meeting minutes from July 9th. We have meeting minutes from July 9th. Excuse me, we're still
I know him.
How are you?
Okay, great.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too, sir.
We have meeting minutes from July 9th. Did anybody have any issues with that, or any questions, concerns?
No.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the July 9th, 2019 meeting minutes. Seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor? That's 5-0.
No, I'm going to abstain, I wasn't here.
Well, I wasn't here either,
So
but
you can
we
still,
still vote.
we go through this all the time. You can still vote.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
5-0. Is that still valid? Okay, all right. There is no agenda yet because we're 3 weeks away.
We have an extra week. Right.
There are, what do we got so far?
Right now, we have 5 cases for that August 13th.
That include the one we tabled, or that would be a sixth
That would be a
case?
6th.
There'll be a 6th. And there's a large project on there. Yeah, okay, all right, sorry. We don't have that yet. Okay, sorry. That's not important. Any other discussion? Anybody like to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lionel. All in favor? All right, we're adjourned at 9:26.